Okay, I don't see any half-mast eyes or anything, so we're going to keep going for it. So as Lorian said, we're going to talk a little bit about the mill levy rate resolution. I think an original agenda that you may have seen had Lorian talking about that, but because of the nature of how that came to be in conjunction with the debt policy, we wanted to actually talk about those two things together. So just for some history, at the time that this target mill levy rate resolution was passed, back in 2016, it also was passed in conjunction with a revision to the debt policy. And so we'll get into the details on the debt policy, but there are 5 ratios that we use that control how much debt we can have. At the time, the will of the commission was to try and reduce how much debt we had and how much we would take on. And so in order to do that, we had this debt policy change that changed a benchmark that would actually prevent us from being able to issue new debt really until about 22, 23. And so at that time, we would have some pretty significant debt fall off, Exploration Place, and some other bigger projects. So the way to enforce that, though, then was this resolution, a target mill levy rate resolution. And so the goal was to implement a mill levy rate at the 2010 level. So it was the budget, it was the mill levy rate that was in place for the 2011 budget. So it held that steady, and then once that debt fell off, it intentionally reduced the mill levy rate by about 0.6 mils to make up for that debt service cost that was falling off in order to prevent it from maybe being applied to other areas of the budget. So those two things were passed actually on the same day, back in 2016. Well, then in 2017, the debt policy changed so that that benchmark was actually increased. It wasn't an increase as high as it had been historically, but it definitely provided some additional flexibility and capacity. And so at that time, it was discussed that we would need to amend the mill levy rate resolution to take that into account, because otherwise the consequence, and you're seeing that play out in the forecast now, the consequence is we must pay that debt service. They can legally compel us to tax to pay that debt service. That's how the law works, and Garth Herman from Gilmore and Bell will be here soon and can get into those additional details. But the consequence of being able to issue more debt but not having more revenue to pay for it is that we're going to have to cut operations in order to fund that debt service. Now, since then, of course, we have actually taken steps. We have recommended to you to approve additional debt issuances for Road and Bridge, for the Ronald Reagan Building, and for projects like that. And certainly we contemplate issuing additional debt in the capital improvement program that you approved last year. It also definitely will be in recommendations that we come to you with this coming year, especially with debt being so darn cheap right now. So we have kind of this issue where the 2023 decrease, we're truly starting to see the real impact. It will affect the ability to do anything serious about compensation. It will affect the ability to potentially increase or do new programs, or even in a worst case scenario, it just makes any cuts we may have to do even worse. Because as Lorian shared with you, the impact of that 0.6 mil reduction is $3.4 million each year on a recurring basis. And that's significant. And so one of the things that we need to talk about is whether it's time to go ahead and either amend that resolution or repeal it, whatever will the commission may want. But we started to kind of circle around it with the credit rating agencies last year. We expect it will become a bigger issue also with them right now, and we'll get into it with the debt policy discussion also. We are at AAA with Standard & Poor's, which is the most highly respected of the 3 big credit rating agencies. And we don't want to lose that because of management decisions like these, where the commission actually does have the authority and ability to make a change, as opposed to some kind of intervening factor that comes in and imposes it on us, like COVID. So not necessarily asking for a decision point today by any means, but it will definitely need to be something that we talk about in the coming months. And if there is some support or consensus of support to change that, again, whether it's repeal or whether it's maybe simply removing it, setting at a different rate, whatever this commission wants to do, we can work with legal to prepare a resolution to come to you. But as your CFO, I am remiss if I do not tell you that this is out there and it's a real threat. And I highly encourage you to do something about it, recognizing the circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this issue. When I came on the commission, we had a very healthy fund balance, and we weren't really worried about this at that point in time. Since that time, a lot has changed, and we do have 4 different commissioners on the commission at the present time than were on there when this was passed. I believe strongly that any commission, doesn't matter when they're on, should not tie the hands of a future commission, and that's what's happened with this, is that a previous commission has tied this commission's hands. And so I don't believe that at any time you should take an action that's going to put a future commission in jeopardy, because you don't know what the future holds. By the same token, I believe this commission that's now in power has to leave the next commission, that we don't know who they are, in a position that they're not in jeopardy also. We have to leave them the same type of strong fund balance that I enjoyed when I first came on the commission. So the actions we take, I think, are really twofold. We need to untie the hands of any commission from previous commissioners, and we need to look to the future to make sure that we support any future commissioners so that their hands aren't tied. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I can wait if you want.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, I do want to speak to this because I was the one commissioner that's here that did vote for this, and I want to explain the thought behind it. There was a lot of desire at the time to move away from using debt to fund things in the county that frankly they weren't emergency type situations. They were things we just wanted to have stuff sooner than later, and I agree that debt actually is a little bit cheaper today than it was back then, but we knew at the time that the Exploration Place building was going to pay off between, I guess in 2022. And at that time, the equivalent amount of that was 0.601 mils. So that was why that number was chosen. Let's talk about the target mill levy, first of all. Most governing bodies don't have a target mill levy resolution at all, okay? You'll notice that our mill levy this year is not 29.359, but it's 29.376. And the reason that is because when we passed the budget, we planned on 29.359, but through the appeals of many taxpayers and then the technical adjustment made by the county clerk, he calculated a new mill levy for the county, and it's 29.376 is required on that assessed value to generate the dollars we need to fund the budget. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay. So most municipalities don't do this. They simply take last year's mill levy and they use that as a baseline for next year's budget. So right off the bat, if we wanted to follow what most municipalities do, we would use 29.376, not 29.359. That's what the resolution actually says. The difference, my calculation, is about $126,000 right now, okay? So if we did not have that target, we would have a budget growth of $126,000 just because of process, okay? Anyway, so that's the first thing I would say. Second of all, this I don't think does tie the hands of any future commission. We can go back and change policy. We have the authority to do whatever we want to do. So we're not bound by this. We have the authority to do anything we want to do here. I would argue that when you pass a 5-year funding agreement, which we have numerous funding agreements, and I support them, by the way, but you're tying the hands of future commissioners, making decisions that they really can't make going forward. When we decide to use debt to buy a building, if we spend $30 million to buy a new administration building, we're tying the hands of future commissioners to pay those debts. So this idea that we don't have impact on the future commission is really not, in my opinion, a fair assessment. We pass policy to the best of our ability, and we do the best we can. Every commission does the best they can. But everything can be changed, at least this can be changed. If we really wanted to, we could change our funding agreements with our partners in this community, but I don't think we want to do that. I would say, I know there's some desire to hold on to that .601 mils. I think that was maybe a greater desire under the tax lid. Tax lid's going away, apparently. So it's letting you know. Give me that shrug of the shoulders, but I think tax lid's going to go away. Senate Bill 13, it looks like it's passing to me. So we are now empowered by the legislature to govern and to levy whatever taxes we want to levy. Now, of course, we'll have to inform our taxpayers and get through a budget hearing and vote for those things, but that's certainly fair. There's one thing that happened back in 1985. I still am bothered internally. I'm so bothered by this. I don't like what we do here. And that is the aging mill levy did pass with about a 2/3 vote of this community. About 2-1 voted for that. And at that time, there was parades in downtown Wichita, and I have the articles to share with you if you want to see it. There was rallies by the elderly of this community that really championed the idea of having an aging mill levy. And the opponents to that were generally, if I was going to characterize them, I'd say they're generally the people who are anti-government, okay? They didn't like taxes and that type of thing. So the opponents were against it. The small government folks were against it. And the elderly of this community were for it, if I was going to characterize those two groups. It passed on a vote of 2-1. But what we actually do, in my opinion, is by the way, when it passed, we did raise the mill levy the following year by about 3 mills. The very first year after this, they created this item in our budget for aging services. The ballot question actually said, shall Sedgwick County levy up to 1 mil for service programs for the elderly? In my opinion, what that actually means is programs like Meals on Wheels, for example, or wheelchair programs, where we provide funding, grant funding out to service providers to provide services for the elderly. And the senior centers is part of that. The following year that this happened, Wichita basically had stopped funding senior centers because we passed a mill levy. They essentially thought that Sedgwick County should support this through the mill levy of the Sedgwick County, and so Wichita basically shifted that burden. And that's just a piece of history. Derby actually did the same thing, but then they changed their mind and went backwards. And Derby actually does fund their senior center very well. In fact, I think it's one of the greatest senior centers in the entire nation, frankly. And the city of Derby does fund that. But what we actually do, and Lindsay, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we calculate a lot of things we do for aging. We have transportation programs, we have meal programs. There's 13 or 15 different things we do that draw out of those funds. And we essentially debate what we want to do, and we calculate a mill levy equivalent. And you'll notice on line 58, the volatility of that number is 0.468, 0.441, 0.469, and on it goes. If you go backwards, it's been as high as 0.8, and it's been as low as 0.41. So it's volatile. And I've had legal look at the question. They said all the mill levy question actually did was limit us to 1 mil. It didn't actually say we had to spend anything. 0 is a number, and we could spend 0 and actually be in compliance with that law. That's a legal definition, or legal interpretation of that ballot question. I frankly, personally disagree. I think that the people have spoken, and I'm bothered at the fact that this continues to be too political. I would much rather take part of that 0.601 mills and give them what I would call mill levy funding. In other words, let's pass a resolution that targets a certain mill levy, and I think it needs to go directly to service programs for the elderly, as the question stated. Things like Meals on Wheels and wheelchair programs and handlebar, ADA handles in the homes, and all kinds of things that should be used to help the elderly in this community. But rather than making this political, I just think we ought to dedicate, just like we do with WSU. Notice on line 55, someone in our past has made it so we provide 1.5 mil to WSU, and I support that. We don't really debate that. We just give it to them, and we trust them to do what they can with that money to make it go as far as possible in this community. We don't even we don't even discuss it. There's 1.5 mills, and by the way, 1 mill is about $5.07 million. So we're talking about $8 million roughly goes to WSU, and I support that. But rather than simply have a process whereby we simply debate politically what we should or should not do in the aging community, I would like to give them a static mill levy funding, something that they can depend on, and let them figure out how to spend that money like WSU does. To me, this makes it less political. Takes it away from us, which is fine, and I would be willing to certainly visit that 0.601 mills with this in mind, to give them a static mill levy. That's plenty. I've said too much already, but thank you for listening.
Is any other comments? There's, I think Mr. Papoon might recall, but I believe the WSU mill levy was, was the state authorizing Wichita University to become Wichita State University, and that was part of the requirement, was a commitment forever of a dedicated mill to the university. So that's about right, I think.
And not to get into the debate there, but I think that we moved it to the county because it was a broader tax base, and that was a choice we made here.
Okay, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Originally, when Wichita State was, I think, got into the Board of Regents, it was the city of Wichita committed a one mill tax, 1.5 mil, whatever. Yeah, and then, as Commissioner Howell said, the county took it on as a county-wide sales tax. So, but we're
Property tax, not sales tax.
property tax. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Can I go? Okay. I guess just so, since it seems like everyone's kind of made it where they look what they're kind of thinking, I'd be okay with just removing what's going to happen in 2023. I don't think that we can offer the services that we do now without making cuts, and we already are at a point where we need to fund more, so I think that's just not in our best interest. And then going back to the technology fund, I would agree that we could try and get that to roll over into something else, but I also think we need to really look at how we can utilize that better. So, I mean, through technology, we can make things so much more efficient and cost savings long-term. I know it's a upfront cost usually, but I think we really need to look at how the county is going to do things going forward and how we can make things more efficient. And, you know, that's the technology piece is the biggest part of that. And so I think we need to keep that and then make sure that, you know, we're utilizing that as best as we can. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Commissioner Cruz?
How long is, so for the WSU program development, is that indefinite?
It's in statute as 1.5 mils. It basically says it should be used for debt. And then there's some other special projects, and in the budget book, we produce a list of how those dollars are used. It's actually used to fund our interns. We also get some special project money, but then a huge chunk of that cash now goes toward their experiential engineering building. And actually, when we get into debt, we'll talk about something called the Public Building Commission, which is what built this building, but it also built that experiential engineering building. And so part of their dollars are committed through, I think, 2045, if I recall correctly, toward the construction and payment of that facility on their innovation campus.
So what portion of that is scholarship money?
I can look it up on my phone if you have another question while I pull that up real quick.
I would be interested to know of that scholarship money where, how many students are impacted by that?
We can ask Andy Schlepp to that.
And then line 56, when we talk about CommCare, I see those numbers are kind of really fluctuating.
So, and it may help to talk about that a little bit, if I can real quick, why those numbers fluctuate for Comcare and Aging. If you look off to the right, you'll see that there's a goal fund balance. And so basically, we are working to get them to a specific target over time. There are fluctuations in their budgets, maybe depending on if they have a specific project, maybe even a TRB project or capital improvement or anything like that, and that will cause some changes. Bless your heart, thank you. Lorian saves the day again. So that's why you'll see some fluctuations there, because we look at the forecast and see what we really think we're gonna have to spend. It can be that 27th pay period, too, that will cause fluctuations. Because we're intentionally trying to fund those other funds to a specific level, and then the general fund takes the hit for whatever's left over. But it's all because we're trying to get to that goal fund balance. But we don't want to do it overnight. And so that's why you'll see some variation there.
Well, when we talk about providing services to the community and being efficient, providing a location that's easily accessible, this is my third year on this commission, and every single year we have had behavioral health as our #1 legislative platform. Budgets are about priorities, and if that's a priority, how do we make it a priority in this budget? How do we put dollars behind it that says this commission supports behavioral health in a financial way? And we have a behavioral health system that is seeing a lot of attention. There's a lot of people talking about it. We are actually, the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition is doing a presentation at the downtown board meeting coming up. We have a lot of interest from the business community. I wonder at what point are we actually going to put dollars behind those programs? We see from the studies that are on the Mental Health and Substance Abuse website that just was launched. We have a cost avoidance study that has been produced. We have a high utilizers study. We know that one person in our community was almost $1 million worth of services. And so how can we reduce the burden on our community for those people who are looking to become productive citizens? They walk into our ComCare facility and they can't be seen for 6 to 8 weeks. How are we going to reduce those costs? That's what I'm asking, because when we have folks who are put in handcuffs and taken to jail, they're not criminals. They need to go to ComCare, but we don't have the ability to service them when they need service. So that's a real challenge that I think we have to. Where are we gonna actually fund that? And then the second point would be the disjointed services that we provide. Right now, ComCare is on a one-way street. Is it more convenient for government, or is it convenient for our community? And I would have to say it's more convenient for us. How can we combine services? How can we combine our Morris Street with our ComCare services in a location that is effective and efficient mode of operation for care for those individuals in our community? We just saw a 316 building that was a partnership between private and public. We're going to hopefully be revitalizing an area of town where a lot of drug abuse happens. And so I wonder if we're really going to move the needle, if we're really going to change things and get people the help and care that they need in an efficient and effective manner that will reduce our jail costs, that will reduce our ER admissions. That's what we need to start looking at. And so I just really hope that when we talk about behavioral health, We don't just talk about it. We actually put money behind it that says, okay, we're serious about this. And we're going to make sure that this budget, because budgets are about priorities, I'll say it again, that we prioritize in a financial way.
And I think we did get refreshed numbers for the community crisis CIP, so I think that'll come obviously up this year to the rest of the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition information, and that, I think that'll just be a larger discussion, and I know Tim and his team are working on that. I just think COVID's kind of hijacked a lot of those good things we had trajectory on. And then Lorian provided just to go back, because I don't want to fail to answer your question. For student support, there is $800,000 that's dedicated to WSU tech support of that 1.5 mils. There's a WSU Sedgwick County Merit Scholarship Program that gets $3.7 million. There are urban assistantships that are getting $53,338, and I honestly have no idea what that is. Graduate research assistantships of $216,937, and then graduate scholarships get $155,204. So 5.1 million of the total of about 8.9 million goes to student support in those ways, and then the debt is about 2.9 million. And then there's just some other smaller buckets of that 1.5 mils. So I don't know if I properly addressed your questions, Commissioner Cruz, but they're definitely on the radar. And I know we'll be having more discussion about them.
Okay, any other commissioners have any comments this time? Don't see any.
Okay, well, we may be
Thanks,
bringing
Lindsay.
a resolution to you then on mill levy rates soon. So we may, if it's okay with Tom, maybe I'll join you all on your weekly briefings to get some consensus about what we need to
Okay.
craft in a resolution, and then work with legal to do that, if that sounds okay.
Okay.
All right, and we are about to move to debt policy, and Garth Herman is from Gilmore and Bell, and he is on his way. He just sent me a text that said he got caught on a call, so he's rushing to get here. So he was gonna go first, but if it's okay with you, we can either take a quick break, or I can jump into my part. Which would you prefer? Quick break? Okay, I love that idea.
Ready, break.
Okay, we'll be back here at, let's say, 10:25, please.